Welcome to MagicGatheringStrat. I'm Dan, and today I'm talking to MakingSmartPlays. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, what's going on? I appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah, making smart plays, or some people just call me MSP for short.
Yeah, can you tell the listeners a little about yourself?
Yeah, I'm not like a great Magic player or anything like that. I've never gone on the Pro Tour or anything like that. I just have been playing Paper Magic since like Tempest Block, way, way back then. And I've played on and off, here and there. And then I didn't really play a whole lot of MTGO other than an occasional draft until Pauper came out. And then when Pauper came out, that was basically the reason I played. And I just kept grinding Pauper, and whenever I would win, I would be like, well, what do I do with these tickets? I'll buy more commons, and then, like a lot of these guys, eventually I got 4 of every common out there. So then I started, picking up, dual lands and Force of Wills and Tarmogoyfs, and now I'm able to play Modern and Legacy and RTR block basically off the back of Pauper. So I mean, Pauper's done a lot for me. I really appreciate the format, and I appreciate all the people out there that play it, because there's a lot of good people. I mean, there's some negative people, but there's a lot more good people than bad in the community.
I must say that's one of the things that draws me to Pauper is the community, absolutely. It's so different. So, for example, when I do modern videos, the comments are all different than Pauper videos. Maybe because I suck at modern, but anyway, today you are here for a special reason.
Yeah. I really appreciate you having me on. I just want to go on the record. I want to make quite a few predictions about what's going to happen with some particular cards, some particular decks, and some particular archetypes. Um, Particularly in light of the fact that we've got this band coming up with Cloudpost and Temporal Fissure. So that's basically what I'm here to do today. The other thing I guess I should probably mention, because like I'm a pretty obscure dude. Like I play in spurts where I'll play furiously for like a month or 2 or 3, and then I will just drop off the planet for like 4, 5, 6 months. But during the pendency of when they were doing PEs, I've actually got 3 first place finishes, and they're still out there, so people can double check that I'm not making it up.
I just
And
ran through your result list here with 15 pages on MTG stats.
yeah. So I mean, and I think some of that stuff might even be from before MTG stats. Like I'm like kind of an old codger on some of that. I'm not as old school as some of these guys. Some of these guys have been around since like before there was even a weekend challenge, But
The
I've
first one here
actually
is from 2009.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
but I mean, I've been around, long enough to basically see the metagame evolve a long way, and I think I'm either the only or one of like maybe 2 or 3 people to have 3 Pauper PE #1 finishes, which like you can get lucky in 4-0 or 3-1 in a daily. But to me, I think it means something like when you top 8 or do well in a PE event, because you can't really get lucky and do that.
that's the biggest reason they should bring them back. We missed them.
Yeah, it would provide a lot of really good metagame information if they would, and it would be great. But anyway, you getting right into it, man. Yeah, that's pretty much just the overall background. And yeah, I really want to make some predictions. I think a lot of people are probably excited about these bannings. I think a few people might have a little bit of anxiety about a few things, and I just wanted to maybe put some predictions and some analysis out there.
All right.
So.
For the record, then, we are recording this on the 19th of September, so we still have 13 days until the bannings go into effect.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we definitely need to put that stamp on there. So, is it alright if I just go ahead and roll right in, because I got like a ton of information to go through?
Go right ahead.
All right. So I want to start actually with some prices, because I know there's a lot of people who, like for me, I was really lucky. I got in when I could just buy up commons left and right for very cheap, And once I got all my stuff, just buying the new stuff's really cheap. But for a lot of people, prices are really important. So I'm just going to start out with making some predictions on where I think prices are going to go on particular cards. So I'm going to start with accumulated knowledge, just kind of randomly. And what I'm doing is I'm going on Pure MTGO's state of the program that's done by a guy named Peter, who's really awesome. And he does this state of the program article on there every Friday. If you haven't checked it out, you should.
It's
It
really
gives a
good.
price. Yeah, it's a great article. So I'm just going to go down the Pauper cards that he puts on his cards that he follows to keep a peg on the prices in the format. So Accumulated knowledge, I think as of this last Friday when he put his post up, it looked like it had slipped by 23 cents. I think it's going to basically kind of dirtle around and go up a little bit, go down a little bit. I don't think it's going to be majorly impacted. I think it's going to benefit from the fact that basically mid-range and control decks are going to be a real thing again. With Temporal Fissure gone, other decks can actually play. The problem with accumulated knowledge is you can play Think Twice, and you play 3 Think Twices and you've drawn 6 cards. You play 3 accumulated knowledges and you've drawn 6 cards. So you're not getting any real maximum benefit from accumulated knowledge other than saving the mana until you've played your 4th one, which doesn't happen that many matches, which means, in my opinion, most people aren't really going to use accumulated knowledge effectively unless they're running it and Think Twice, because it's not a bad call after you're already running that. So that's a lot to say that it's kind of useful, but it's not that great. It's kind of niche, if you will. So I don't think it's going to continue to creep up, but very slowly. It's basically it.
It doesn't see any other format play, right? It isn't played in Legacy.
Yeah, Legacy a little bit like Oath of Druids. That's pretty fringe. Well, I mean, actually, that's in Classic or whatever.
Okay.
It's pretty fringe. Ancestral Mask, I think, is going to continue to hold its ground. I think it'll even potentially go up, maybe even in the short run. I think established cards that go into established decks are going to continue to do well, because right now, a lot of people, particularly spikes who are really good players but they don't care to try to go out and build their own thing. People are going to go towards what's working. And since the green-white auras is working, I think in the short run it's going to hold its own, maybe go up some. The problem it's going to have is Diabolic Edict and various edict effects are going to pop up more because of the fact that more control decks are going to start to spring up, I think, because there's going to be more room for brewers to actually play them without getting blown out in the long game.
Yes.
So I think it's probably about to be at its pinnacle, but then again, there's not a lot of them out there, and I think it's a deck that's always going to be around. So I wouldn't bail and dump them now, but if you've been thinking about selling, I think give it another 3 or 4 months, and it's probably not a terrible time if you want to unload them. But I wouldn't say, no, don't fire sell them or whatever.
Right.
Armadillo Cloak, kind of same story. Brainstorm's never going to go down again unless it gets reprinted or promoed, which is possible. It's not going to get reprinted, I don't think. I don't think they'll ever do that, but it could get promoted again just randomly.
It depends on if they will run the old formats again. They haven't done so for quite some time now. It's almost a year.
True.
I know it's not a year. It's 9 months since the New Year's.
Yeah.
When Brainstorm was actually down to 1 ticket.
It's true too. Yeah. I think Legacy is, Legacy events have actually been firing off the dailies.
Yeah, a couple of classics too, right?
Yeah, a couple of classics, but Legacy's been really consistent. So I think Brainstorm's going to hold its own. Plus, as long as they don't put any more of them out there, a lot of casual players like it too, and I think it's going to hang on.
Power 9 will affect the price of Brainstorm as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure at least temporarily there's going to be a spike in vintage play, but it'll probably have a lot to do with what the price points are on the Power 9, if a lot of people can afford it or not.
I don't think they will. That's an interesting topic in itself. We should not go into that, but I don't think they will make them impossible to get.
You know what? Since we only have an hour, I'm actually just going to breeze through all the rest of these real quick. I realize I'm probably taking up way too much time, but Chain Lightning, I think it's going to go up. Cloud of Fairies, I believe it's going to go down. Cloud Post down. Crypt Rats up. Days not really going, steadily creeping up. Diabolic Edict up a little bit. Fire Blast up. Gorilla Shaman steadily creeping up, but nothing drastic. Gush just kind of slowly dirtling upwards. Hydroblast is going to continue to go upwards if not reprinted. Moment's Peace I think is probably going to just kind of hang where it is, maybe slowly creep up. Nettle Sentinel I think is going to do really well in the short run, might see some continued growth, but I think it's going to trail off and maybe even retrench and go back down once you get like 6 months out.
I have to say something about Nettle Sentinel.
Yeah, go for it.
I did the finance video in when it was last drafted. Was that in April or something? And I actually went on record and said, buy Nettle Sentinel, buy as many as you can at 113. And that was 4 months ago, so...
Anybody who took that advice, they did great. And I think it's still going to go up a little bit more.
I sold all of mine at 2.
I think people, I think I would set my market about 350. If you're really ballsy, hold on till 4. But I think it's going to bounce back down again because elves is really a thing right now because of the lack of crypt rats out there. But I think they're going to be coming back, and so I think that's going to really put the brakes on him at some point. Maybe even sooner than that. So Prohibit, I think, is going to go up. I think it's going to go back up quite a bit, maybe even from 3 to 4. Pyroblast is going to continue to creep up if not reprinted. I think Quarian Ranger is probably about maxed out right now for the same reason with the Crypt Rats. Serrated Arrows is, there's different ways of looking at it, but I think as long as there's not more of them in circulation, it's going to continue to be a solid sideboard card if nothing else. So it'll probably keep creeping up. I think Snap is also going to go down a little bit, maybe a lot. Standard Bearer will probably continue to hold its own. I think Unearth's got room to go up. So
yeah, I expect Cloud of Fairs to hit 5 tickets and Snap to hit 250.
That's very possible. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of
Cloud of Fairs will go down to its earlier levels.
So the only other thing I want to put out there, these are cards that are not on that list, but Earth Rift is at $1 right now. I think it's going to really crater. And Spinning Darkness is at $3 right now. I think it's going to hold its own and quite possibly go up. I think the free spells, the free removal spells, like it and Snuff Out, are going to be really solid. Just because the more people have to start turning creatures sideways to win games without other gimmicky stuff, the better free removal spells get, I think. And that goes for stuff like Firebolt. I mean, Firebolt's probably not going to go like way up, but you can get the old Odyssey ones for 16 cents from MTGO traders, and that's a solid buy, I would say, at this point. Because there's also going to be like Ulamog's Crusher is not going to be seeing nearly as much play anymore. We're going to see a lot of, you need to be able to kill a 2/2. There's going to be some 4 toughness out there, but I think Firebolts are also a great time to pick those up if you don't have them already.
Yep.
So. Anyway, so that's all the card prices. Moving along into archetypes. As far as combo goes, I really don't think we're actually going to see a top-tier contender combo deck for... I'm thinking it could be quite a while, man. Like I think we're going to have to see several more expansions before somebody puts something together. And when I say top-tier, I mean something that is in the top 4 decks, basically top 4 or 5 decks.
You're not including the Voltron decks here, like Hexproof or Delver Fiend in the combo.
Yeah, no. To me, that stuff's not really combo. That's just synergistic.
Yeah, it's sort of a gray zone between stuff. All right, go on.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And same thing, yeah, like anything that has Killing Fiend, anything that like Elves, I don't consider any of that stuff combo. So I think we will continue to see some stuff like that, but I think those kind of decks are going to get hurt too. Like the Killing Fiend, anything that's revolving around Killing Fiend, and it's going to get hurt really badly by the fact that there's going to be a lot more decks out there that I think there's going to be more control decks that spring up in the long run. And I think the extra removal that's out there in the early game is going to cause them problems unless they start adding in a lot more protection. I think in the short run, we're definitely going to see aggro doing really well because, in the short run of any format, like take a look at Modern. For a long time, Modern in the very beginning was a pretty aggressive format. And then from there, mid-range finally started to pick it up to where now Jund is just like a boss. And so in the very, very beginning, the Wild Wild West stages, a lot of people want to play on the more aggressive side of things. And I think we'll see that. Stompy's still going to be a very good deck. I think that Mono Blue Aggro is still going to be a very good deck, but I don't think it's going to be as good as a lot of people think. A lot of people are thinking it's going to be like the new best deck, and it may be in the short run, but I think 2 expansions from now, or less, there will be another deck that holds more metagame share in terms of wins and daily events. 3 1s, 4 0s. So I'm calling it now. Mono Blue Aggro will not stay at the top. I don't think more than 2 more expansions.
Yeah, I think Stompy is already ahead of it some days if you check the metagames things.
Really? Yeah,
Stompy is ahead of it right now on Goldfish.
Is it really? Wow.
Goldfish, yeah.
I think in that case, I would also go on the record and say I don't think Stompy is going to be number 1 either. I don't think either of those 2 will hold number 1 2 expansions from now. I think that in the short run, Control may see a little bit of trouble. The thinking I've heard some people say is that without Cloud Post, Control decks can't hang with aggro, and I don't think that's true at all.
I absolutely don't think that's true. I think there's a ton of control decks that can enter the field now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Burn's going to see a comeback too, and that's really going to shake up the metagame, because right now a lot of decks, like Burn's kind of a thing right now, but it's a very fringe thing. You don't really see a lot of it. So basically I think when it comes back, the big impact it's going to have is people are actually going to need to have some life gain or, some counter spells. Some decks are already running some counter spells, but life gain is going to be important, damage prevent or counter spells. And so I think Burn's probably going to catch a few of the early developing control decks with their pants down because they haven't had to deal with Burn right now, and they might forget that, or they may not be aware that it's coming back. Because without, Cloud Post and Glimmer Post just so bad for Burn when you can gain that much life and be a control combo deck. So I think Burn's actually going to be back. When that happens, that's actually going to cause, further metagame adjustments. I think that Goblins is going to similarly benefit, like the Burn package Goblin deck. A lot of times Goblins kind of uses that last bit of Burn to get there. And so I think its creatures are not as quality as, some other aggro deck options out there, in the sense that if you look at like Stompy or even just mono blue aggro, its creatures kind of get outclassed really fast. It leans really heavily on drawing a Bushwhacker. And the Burn, it leans heavily on having that to finish out games. And so with Cloud Post gone and Glimmer Post kind of becoming irrelevant, I think that's also going to help Goblins become very good. And for anybody who wasn't around back in the day for a very long time, Goblins was the #1 deck. I don't necessarily know or think it'll be the #1 deck again, because Stompy's gotten so many good tools since then.
It had quite a resurgence in the last few weeks, Goblins.
Yeah. I wasn't aware of that.
It's number 8 here on the metagame right now.
Okay, I think it's going to continue to. I don't think it's going to lose or slow down any in terms of. I think it'll just continue to ramp up after the ban. I think it's going to have a lot of room. It's very good at getting there. Like it doesn't stall out at the last few points because of the fact that it's pack and burn. So other random. I think that for anybody who follows Deluxeicoff, I think he'll finally start brewing things besides hexproof. Like he'll start playing something else seriously, because I'm sure he can't wait to start throwing some new stuff out there. So I think I'm making the prediction he's going to start playing something else seriously. We'll see what happens with that.
He had this Death Touch deck he was doing for a couple of months back that seems like an excellent choice in this metagame, actually, except that it dies to any control deck.
Yeah, so may not be that, but he'll have something going on. I think also, just kind of more tangentially, I think Pauper is going to, this is something I think most people would agree with, I think Pauper is going to massively benefit from these bans. People shouldn't be worried. Basically, I think both player run events and the daily events are going to see higher attendance creep up a little bit because of this. I think a lot of people are going to come back that were really frustrated. So I also am going to go on a limb, this is kind of tangential, I'm going to predict that we will see standard Pauper become a supported format, but not anytime soon. I think it's going to be a long time, but I think it's on the way. I think it's a very cheap gateway drug, format, for people to get into Magic. And I think it's too narrow and too limited to keep people staying interested forever just in that space. Like, nobody's going to quit playing Standard or Classic Pauper just to play Standard Pauper. You'll just get bored out of your mind. So a lot of people say that format is too narrow. I think that's actually its redeeming quality. So anyway, I'm not going to get too deep in that because that's a whole nother 1 hour subject.
When will it be a sanctioned format?
Oh, it's not going to be for a long time, man. I'm thinking we're looking at... I'm going to say a year and a half. We're a year and a half out.
Okay, so March 2015.
Yeah, that's my inside. I'm going to say at the outside 3 years, because damn, Blizzard moves so slow. I'm sorry, Blizzard. My other gaming company I like to rail on, WotC moves so slow.
Yes.
The other thing is, people should also not panic in terms of, a lot of people think this is just going to open the floodgates for bans. I know that you've actually mentioned that you would like to see them take a more active role in policing the game, which would probably be good, but unfortunately, I don't think they're going to do that. The silver lining there, though, is all these people who say that this is just going to be a slippery slope of ban after ban after ban. I'm going to say no. I'm going to predict that we're not actually going to see another adjustment to the ban list for at least 2 more expansions, and it could be a lot more than that. So I think they're going to let everything settle. I think they feel like they're making a big change, which they are. And so I don't anticipate, I'm going to say there's not going to be any more bans for at least 2 more expansions. So
journey into Nyx as the earliest possibility.
Yeah, and even then, that's like the earliest. Really and truly, I don't think we're going to see another ban for 3, 4, 5 more expansions, really, unless they just introduce something by accident that's broken. And I don't think they will at Common with the new World Order and everything. So I think we're going to get settled in and get used to the format as it's going to be for a while. Moving on from there, talking generally about archetypes. Again, I think combo is really going to be fizzled out. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot going on there for quite some time. I think that aggro decks are going to do very well in the short run. And I think we're going to start to see, like, for a long time there was like this blurring between control and mid-range. Like you could look at a mono black control list and it could, even though it's called mono black control, a lot of those were actually mid-range decks. They had a ton of creatures with value creatures that generated cards with some backup removal. But then you would also see some mono black control lists that were basically just a ton of removal cards with a few creatures thrown in, which were actually control decks. I think we're going to start to see more of a blurring between mid-range and some aggro. You're going to see some slow mid-range decks that are more trying to grind value to the end game. And you're actually, for the first time in a long time, you're going to start to see something between, something that, like you've got fairies, which is counter spells. It's kind of like a tempo, counter sliver deck. And that's kind of the unique thing out there right now in terms of that. And you have stuff like elves that tries to, really ramp up fast, but it's basically just a highly aggressive deck. Same thing with Kill and Fiend decks. They're basically just highly aggressive decks. But I think you'll start to see some decks that are aggressive, but, they also have kind of a long game plan too. Like, you're going to see a lot of mid-range. You're going to see a lot of niche stuff. You're going to see a huge. I think the metagame is really going to open up. Like E-Hustle. I know you've are familiar with him. Like the enchantment-based decks that he liked to run. I think that stuff. He's going to be that man's going to be making like tickets hand over fist. I'm going to predict that too.
Yeah, that's the easy prediction.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be able to go. I know he really loves running those Dredge style decks, and I think he's going to have an opening to do that. So I'm also going to go out there and say Dredge is going to be a real deck.
There's also Commune with the Gods from Theros that seems quite strong in classic.
Oh, you have to tell me about that, man. Like I don't even.
It's 1 and a green. Draw. Look at the top 5 cards and put 1 creature or enchantment into your hand and the rest in your graveyard.
All right, yeah. So, yeah, I think there will be room for people to brew and try different things, and I think that Dredge has been something that I don't know if anybody's. Man, I haven't seen any serious Dredge play in a long time, just because it gets eaten up so bad by Temporal Fissure.
Yeah.
So, I think there's going to be a number of these decks like that. Like E-Hustle was that guy. I can't even right now, I can't even find the words to talk about how successful, how many tickets that guy was making with his Tortured Existence-based Dredge deck. And, right now, that's not even a thing. And so
he's playing it right now.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's actually making tickets with it too. But, of course, the Fisher matchup is bad.
I heard one of your casts where somebody was like, you can play mid-range now. You just don't want to face up against the Temporal Fissure.
Yeah, exactly.
I got mad not getting bad matchup skills. Yeah, 4-0. But yeah, I mean that's actually a real thing. That's if you just play the odds. So yeah, he's gonna go from making tickets to just being a Big Daddy Warbucks, I guess, after this, because I don't think a lot of people are really going to see stuff like that. They haven't seen it in a long time. That hasn't really been a major deck for some people since they've started playing Pauper.
Yeah.
So I think, it's really going to be worth it for a lot of people out there to go back and look at some more antiquated stuff in the days of old, because we're really going back to a time when Pauper was more like, all the way back to like pre-Urza's Block. Urza's Block is when Temporal Fissure really started to show up as a thing, and it's kind of ebbed, after the Frantic ban. It took it a while to figure out where to go from there. But, it's become a completely different game.
When was this? When was this?
Like when Temporal Fissure really took off?
Yeah, did you say Urza Block? Or?
Yeah, for me, I feel like it was Urza Block when the fairies came out and Snap came out.
All right. Oh.
Because Temporal Fissure was alive before that. And then, of course, also, like in Zendikar...
Wait a minute, Urza Block was like in 98. And Temporal Fissure is from Judgment, isn't it?
Well, in terms of like when the paper releases came out, Urza's Block came...
No, you meant online, of course. Sorry.
Yeah.
The first time Temporal Fissure took off then must have been in 2011.
Yeah, whenever it was that Urza's Block came out.
Yeah.
I'm terrible with dates, man.
All right. I wasn't around at the time either.
Yeah, because what happened was, of course, back then, we didn't have the Glimmer Post coming out in, what was that, the last Phyrexian block or whatever.
Yeah.
So, basically, once the fairies came out, that's when, like, the enchantment-based Temporal Fissure deck was, like, a thing that took everything by storm with Frantic Search and all the free spells that generated it and powered it through. And that's when it really showed up. And then of course, there's the option to play Familiar Storm, which, to give a power comparison, a lot of people talk about it now, how it's, maybe a step behind Mono Blue with Post, but I mean, that's how good it is. So back then, it was also very good once it was discovered.
I remember watching these premiere events where there were like 7 Familiar Storm decks in the top.
Yeah. And to be honest, man, like that was one of those times where like there were two, like when we got to like Urza's Block and that stuff came out, I was just kind of bummed. I was like, man, this is just not the same, So I took a long break and then came back again and started playing again, and I was still, having success, but it's just not as, it feels more like grinding and a lot less fun to me when this is what the metagame is at. So I'm really pretty excited. Like for example, right now I'm running a deck where, like, since I've started playing it, and I'm playing like furiously right now because I have like 2 weeks where I can play a lot, and then I probably won't play much until the ban comes into effect. And the current deck I'm running, I'm 5-1 in terms of 3-1ing. So I've gone 3-1 5 times and 2-2 once, and I have not 4-0'd with it.
What are you
playing?
I mean,
I'm just playing blue-black control.
All right.
It's like terrible because I run like 7 creatures. I do the unspeakable. I do what you're not really supposed to be able to do right now. It's just straight up blue-black control.
I love it.
I just jam in people's faces, and I get a lot of people who call me noob, which is probably fair because it looks like a moving train wreck. But it actually, I have like a 33% matchup against Temporal Fissure decks, which is like way more than I should have.
Oh, that sounds way too good.
Yeah, but if I play it outright, I stall enough to clock them, and what happens is 1 out of every few games, I only have to take it to game 3, because if I take it to game 3, I almost always clock them. And I know some people think that's cheesy, but I mean, when I'm in that matchup, I'm like, I got to do whatever I can to have a chance.
I don't blame you. I have done the same thing.
So, anyway, and then basically I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more blurring, because, typical of the line blurred between control and mid-range, I think we're also going to see like some aggressive strategies, because some of those dredge decks can come out fairly aggressive, and, you see something that, looks like it's just a dirtily deck, and the next thing it's like turn 4 and you're dead. So you're like, wow, where'd that come from? And I forget what that like out of Exodus. It's like something Hound where it's a 2/2 creature for a black and 2 colorless. You can discard a creature and it gets +2/+2. And
Yeah, what was that? It was in the Dead Dog deck, right?
I don't even remember the name of it, but it's like it's a real thing. Like you're just tooling along, and the next thing you're like, wow, that thing just did 10 damage to me. That hurt. If you tap out at the wrong time or don't have any answers. So I mean, I think that we'll see kind of a. It's going to come down to like, and just goes to my whole theory of Magic, which is I call it the one step slower, and it's probably the difference between like a guy like Deluxeicoff and a guy like myself, where he probably, and I'm totally speculating on this, like he always wants to be a step ahead, and I'm the kind of player I always want to be one step behind, and what I mean by that is if you play a Grizzly Bear for 2 mana, so you get a 2 for a 2/2. I would rather be 1 turn behind and let you hit me for 2 points, but I drop a 3/3 for 3 mana. So the way I've always thought of it is I want to be 1 step behind but have a little bit more quality, but I don't want to be 2 steps behind, because I feel like once I get to like playing a 4/4 for 5 mana or something, I think you're gonna kill me. So I've always had this philosophy in Magic that the deck that is 1 step behind will win. The deck that is 2 steps behind will lose.
I actually agree 100%. It's you're almost quoting me.
Am I really? Okay.
Yeah, I've always said that the deck that is a little slower wins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so
But
this
you
is right
can't
reality
be
then. Okay. So basically, what I'm feeling like is this is going to be really cool. A lot of people talk about how we have well, not a lot of people. There's a few crazy people out there who somehow think what we have right now is a healthy metagame. And I'm sure you guys have talked about that plenty already. I do not think that's the case, but I think we're headed for a very healthy metagame, because when we finally see these bans, I think it's going to open the door for where you can play a very, very cheap, costed, aggressive deck. I think you'll also be able to play something that's a little bit slower with a higher quality creature base, like White Weenie. And then I think you'll be able to play something a little bit slower with a higher quality creature base. And I think we're going to see gradations all the way from super fast, super aggressive, super cheap decks, all the way up to stuff that is really, really slow and grindy. I mean, I think we might even see a Teachings deck out there, which is there's some very aggressive decks out there, and that's an old deck. I don't know if it's going to be able to come back because it's slow, but I think it'll happen. I think we'll see basically points all along the curve of speed and cost, and what that's going to mean is we will have a real meta where you have a good game against certain decks and you have a bad game against other decks, but you actually have a chance to win a lot of different matchups. And sideboarding will actually be an important consideration, not just against 1 or 2 or 3 decks, but against the whole field. And so you're going to see things like people running a lot of land kill on their sideboard. I don't think you're going to see that anymore. That's kind of one of those obvious predictions. But I think you're going to start seeing people are going to have to start making more use of sideboard cards that have broad application in a lot of matchups. And your particularized hate it's going to be harder to be able to afford that, I think, in the metagame that we're heading towards.
Sounds like a fantastic metagame.
I think it really is. Like the reason I really wanted to do this is because I wanted to get something really hopeful. I wanted to hype this up. Most people are really excited. There's a few people who felt kind of anxious and nervous and weren't so sure about it. I think it's really going to be great because you will see both really aggressive decks and slower control decks, both contenders. I'm actually going to say that in the long run, I think it's possible that control may even have the tools. I think we're going to see more control and mid-range type of decks eventually take back, even though in the short run we're going to see a whole lot of aggression coming out. I think that the dividing line is probably going to be mono blue aggro. If you count that as an aggro deck, I don't know that control is ever going to get an over 50% share of the metagame or close to it. But if you count that kind of as leave that out in no man's land, I think that you will see control take up almost half of the meta eventually at some point, just because of how powerful a lot of blue is basically in terms of, Mole Drifter is just ridiculous, and the massive amount of edict effects that are showing up, and there's just a lot of different stuff out there, Firebolt being a relevant card again because you actually can have 5 mana, in the long game because you didn't have it all bounced back to your hand, so you can get, free 2-for-1s. I mean, Firebolt is just incredible beating for a deck like Goblins.
Yep.
So, because they play a creature on turn one, you're like, okay, I just killed your tempo, and in the late game, you get card advantage too.
So if we look 6 months ahead, can you predict the top 8 decks?
Oh, the top 8 decks 6 months out. Let me take a. I'm gonna just throw some stuff out there. I'll do that for you, but let me set it up a little bit first.
Yep.
I think when we get let's see here. I think once we get out about the first initial 60 days after the ban, I don't think we're going to see a massive amount of control. I think we'll see a fair amount, but I still think it's going to be a very aggro-ish format while people adjust. I think a lot of people are going to, again, they're going to go to Stompy, they're going to go to Mono Blue Aggro, they're going to go to the hexproof enchantment decks. And so I think basically by the time you get 6 months out, I think that we will see a very fair amount of actual control decks starting to show up in mid-range decks. So without further ado, I think when we get that far out, in some sense I'm not sure a whole lot is going to change, because I do think that Stompy is still going to be in the top 8. I think that Mono Black Control, or what some people refer to as Mono Black Control Splash Blue, or Big B/Little U,
yeah,
for those Uber nerds out there. I count those together because, like most sites that you look at, when you do the metagame breakdown, for better or worse, they actually end up getting grouped together a lot of time, even though they're kind of different. So I think that that's like my big prediction, in the sense that, Mono Black Control has really not been like, at least I don't know, you tell me, you'd probably know better than I would. I don't think it's like a top deck right now, is it?
It's not on this top 10 list, but it has been from week to week. So there are some players playing Mono Black Control right now. It did come back a little. It moved back into tier 3 or something like that.
Okay, so I think it's actually going to be up in there. I think that you're going to have. I'm going to go ahead and say Goblins is going to be in the top 8. I think that Mono Blue Aggro. This is where it gets tricky too, because you look at, I think to me the real dividing line between Mono Blue Aggro and Mono Blue Control is the ninjas. I mean, once you drop the ninjas, then you end up dropping the fairies, and so I think I'm talking about decks that still run the Mono Blue Aggro package. I think that deck's going to be. We
commonly refer to that here as Delver.
Delver, okay.
So that's Delver, and the other is Mono Blue Control.
So I think Delver will still be in the top 8. I think Delver is going to have some problems, but the one thing that Delver has going for it, we're talking 6 months out, I think it's still going to be in the top 8. Delver still has room. Like, if you think about it, there's a lot of lists out there that are running, like Phantasmal Bear. There's room on the edges of that deck where it doesn't need like a great card, it just needs like a good card. And it could see vast improvement. Whereas you take a deck like Mono Black Control, and like they had that new card that's coming out where you draw 2 cards and scry 2 for like 3 mana.
Yeah.
And it's hard to fit it into the deck
Exactly.
because it's just that's a very full deck, especially at the 3-drop spot. But see that the thing. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you see that very clearly with Delver, because Delver usually is some random creature from the new expansion that ends up in Delver. They tried out Wingcrafters in Avacyn Restored. They tried out Cloudfin Raptors. Frostburn Weird is in the deck.
Yeah.
Some of the time.
Exactly. So I think there's like people, it's like people who have gone to a restaurant and they're like tasting a little bit of everything, but you can tell they're not really satisfied. So, I mean, it doesn't need a great card. It just needs another solid creature.
Yeah, and people have mentioned playing Omen Speaker in Delver. We talked about that on competitive Pauper Chat.
Oh, right. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very, I mean, that's a very interesting idea. That's going to be the great thing about this meta is there's going to be a lot of room for people to tinker with things. And basically, I guess what I'm saying in a nutshell is that the biggest thing I think Mono Blue Aggro has going for it is with the way the New World Order works right now, they're making better creatures. And that's exactly what Mono Blue Aggro needs is a better creature that has some kind of quirky drawback that doesn't really hurt it that much. And eventually, I think it's going to get that 4 of that creature it needs. And so I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen within 6 months, but I think that deck will hang on and be in the top 8 anyway. And if it gets that, it'll be well up in the top 8.
Yep.
So, the other thing, man, this is the one thing I am really on the edge about. I'm going to say White Weenie is going to be back in I'm going to say top 12, and it might even be top 8.
I said that on the cast also.
Did you really? What did you say?
I expect White Weenie to come back in full force. That White Weenie attracted a lot of players last year, even though it had quite a bad store matchup, right?
I honestly wasn't. Like I said, I'm very feverish. Like when I play hardcore, and then I'll just be out for like 6 months or even a year, man. And so last year, I didn't really hardly show up at all for anything. Like for example, like when you go back and you check the PE results for stuff,
Yeah.
like you can check and see like there were a lot of PE events I didn't make it in, but there were a ton of them I didn't even show up for.
Huh.
So
Okay,
like,
back to the top 8 list.
yeah.
So
Okay,
White Weenie
so
is not in the top 8 list, or is it?
that is, to me, it's like right on the line. I think it. And you gotta forgive me, man. Like I think I'm like prejudiced against White Weenie because I just don't really like it, and it's actually a really good deck. I'm gonna go ahead and say, yeah, you know what? I'll go out on a limb. I'll say White Weenie will make it for this reason. I think it will get slightly overplayed because one, a lot of people have been wanting to play it and they can't right now. So I think it is one of those decks that it'll come out of the gate and some people will have success with it. And when that happens, it's a cheap deck. I think it's still a cheap deck, isn't it? Relatively speaking.
Yes.
So I think due to the fact of the accessibility, I think it's going to see success. And when people see a cheap deck they can pick up and play that looks fun, that they haven't been able to play in a long time, I think it'll probably get overplayed a little bit. So yeah, we'll go ahead and say it's in the top 8, and I think it's definitely going to be in the top 12, even if I'm wrong about the top 8. But I'll go ahead and say top 8.
All right.
I don't think Burn is going to be in the top 8 6 months from now. Burn, I think, will be in the top 8 somewhere between now and 6 months from now, at least in a very short time frame for some period of time, because it's going to show up because people will underestimate it. But once it shows up, it's the kind of deck you can deal with, and I think people will remember to start dealing with it. And so then it'll kind of become like Dredge and Legacy or something, where it just like chews people up and spits them out when they're not ready to deal with it. But those people that do have a few ways of dealing with it will get an automatic buy round when they face it. And that's not the kind of deck a lot of people want to play, where you're just basically at the mercy of the matchup. So
Yeah.
I think Burn is going to be like top 16, maybe top 12. In the short run, somewhere in there, it'll be top 8, but it won't be in the long run. And I think that, by the way, Elves, I think Elves is going to fall out of the top 8. I don't know, is Elves in the top 8 right now?
Yes, it's number 7, and I absolutely agree. Elves will
Yeah.
have a hard time ahead.
Yeah, because I think, the obvious thing is Crypt Rats. I think that's really going to give it grief. I think the other big problem it's going to have, though, is I think there'll be even a few mid-range / control decks that start running red, and even without mass sweepers, once again, stuff like Firebolt. I forget what it is. It's that spell from Zendikar or whatever that's a rebound spell that does 2 damage. So basically free 2 for 1. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a solid card against aggro. And just, even just being able to do a board wipe for 1 damage off of red. So I just think by virtue of there being more mid-range and control black-red decks out there, or blue decks that have black or red access, it's going to cause them to fall out. I do not think that Slivers will be in the top 8. I know that I have to address Slivers, even though a lot of people, I don't know how to say it. It's like a lot of people would probably be like, why are you even talking about Slivers? That's, not really a deck. But then other people out there would get offended that I would even just say what I just said.
Shama would be, because he 4-0'd with Slivers on the 16th.
There you go, man. So I mean, it's gonna be a niche deck. It's not that it's a bad deck. It's just that it kind of is in the same category as Burn. Like if you're playing against a mid range or control deck that gets ahead of you, it's just a beating because they'll take out all your pump slivers and just kind of pick you apart. And it's slow. Like it gets great value, but it's slow. So I think that a deck like Squawks and Hounds, or Tortured Existence, Dredge, or whatever you want to call those things that E-Hustle tends to run, should be that deck should be a top 8 deck, but it won't be.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying because it's so hard to play.
Yeah, and a lot of people just don't, it's not even on a lot of people's radars. And I think, it may see a little bump up, but people will pick up the deck and be like, nah, this is too frustrating. And so we're talking about 6 months from now. That deck should be, but it won't be. There used to be a lot of blink decks back in the day. You will not see blink decks in the top 8 because they're just too slow in this day and age. Same thing goes for teaching decks. It used to be, and I mean a dedicated counterspell based with just a couple of creatures as finishers, control, black, blue, counterspell, teaching, removal deck. That is not going to be in the top 8. You might see like an aggressive deck that splashes mystical teachings in there. And the reason I say that is...
What will be in top 8 then?
How many am I at right now?
5 decks here.
I have 5 decks?
Yeah.
I think, let's see here. I'm really kind of torn. Where is Green White Auras at right now?
It's the 9th deck.
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to pick up any ground in 6 months. So I will say that deck will not. And you just have to forgive me. Like I'm running through every specific deck that can come to my mind.
Yeah.
I do not think that.
Go ahead.
I do not think the Green White Auras is going to make it into the top 8. Let's see here. Also, we've got the Kill and Fiend combo. Where is it at right now?
It's the deck with the most names in Pauper, but we call it Delver Fiend.
Delver Fiend. Okay, where is it right now?
It's in 4th place.
4th place? Whew, that's a tough one. That's a close one. I think I'll just go ahead and say I think it's going to lose ground. I think it's going to drift down towards like the bottom of the barrel. But I think it'll still be in the top 8. When I say bottom of the barrel, what I mean is I think it's going to be closer to the 7 or the 8 spot. But I think it'll hold on to it for at least when we get to the 6th month. I don't think things are going to evolve that fast.
Okay, I'm giving it the 8th spot here because we are going to power line these decks.
Okay, all right, we'll do it. I think, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there too because this will be interesting to some people. I think blue-red, like a counter burn control-ish deck, basically what Is It Post is now, is still going to be a real deck. It's going to be different. It won't be able to rely on the expensive spells it gets away with right now, but it's going to be very fringe, like very niche. I mean, this deck isn't even going to be like it's not even going to be like a top 20 deck.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a good deck. I think it's going to be the kind of deck you'll see people, make tickets on. As far as I think you will see also the same thing with like some tricolor control decks, like blue, white, black, red, blue, white. Who knows what all funky things people will come up with? But I think you'll actually see some very legitimate, like stuff that doesn't even exist right now. You will see these as real decks that people net solid tickets off of. Not just like somebody's pet deck, but like somebody's pet deck that's making money, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun metagame.
Yeah, I think that's going to come out. The thing I'm not sure about, I'm reconsidering Burn. I think Burn may actually have a chance, but I just think by the 6 month mark, I think people will have adjusted.
It's like you say, it comes and goes, so it might be there, it might not be there in March.
Yeah, exactly. I think here's the other thing too. I kind of listed black blue as one category, but it kind of depends on how you do that, because if you break out all black blue decks and separate them from MBC, because I think Trinket is going to pick up quite a bit of ground, I think that I would put black blue generically also in the top 8. Right. If you just look at all the different various black blue control decks. I'm not talking like black blue aggro or whatever, which doesn't exist and never will. There's something I'll probably be wrong about in about 20 years. It's going to take that long to get the card base out for that.
What about mono blue control?
Yes, mono blue control is a real deck, and it's gosh, I'm glad you mentioned that. Mono blue control. How can I forget that? That's a great deck. It's going to be
11th place right now, and
it's going to move up. Yeah, it's going to move up. It's going to be. I'll put it in the top 8. I think it's also going to be. Do I really put a 9th deck in the top 8 for me? Let's see what that does.
We have 8 decks with mono blue control. So the 8 decks would be then Stompy, mono black control, mono blue control, blue black control, Goblins, Delver, White Weenie, and Delver Fiend.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good.
So are you telling me that ATOG Fling won't be a thing?
Oh, Affinity! Man, I'm glad you mentioned that too. Where is Affinity at right now?
Number 6.
Yeah, Affinity is still going to be there, man. Yeah, Affinity's definitely going to be there.
So what is it removing from kicking out Delver Fiend then, or?
Oh man, this is tough. Did we still have? Let's see. I can't take out White Weenie because I think it's still going to be there. Do we have both? Are we including both mono black and black blue control up there right now?
Yes.
Okay. I got to stick with that because I think those are both going to be very solid decks. I can't take Stompy out. So we've got what? Killing Fiend or?
We now have Stompy, mono black control, blue black control, Goblins, Delver, White Weenie, mono blue control, Affinity, and Delver Fiend.
I guess I'm gonna drop. Man, I'm probably gonna be wrong about this, but I would drop Delver Fiend.
All right. So then we have to power line them. Which deck is number 1 on the daily reported on March the 19th of 2014?
Now this is somewhere where I gotta mention these two things. Yeah. I really think we're gonna have the kind of quality of metagame that I hope. This is kind of probably more aspirational than intelligent for me to say this, but I'm really hoping it's going to be something that will surprise people that nobody anticipated. Having said that, I'm just going to put the mono black control or mono black control splash blue. I think I'll put up there in the.
They are now separated, so.
Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put. If we're going to separate them out, in that case, I think that I will put Stompy in that top spot because I think it's going to have a better ability to adjust.
All right.
And then after Stompy, I will go ahead and put let's see. And tell me where is, you said Affinity's number 4 right now?
Number 6.
What are the top 3 right now?
Stompy, Mono Blue, Stormpost, and Delver.
And Delver. And what's number? And then Affinity's number 4.
Delver Fiend is number 4. Is at post number 5.
So from there, I just say shot in the dark. I will put. I'll go ahead and put Goblins number 2.
All right.
I'll put Mono Black Control number 3.
Yep.
I'll put. Let's put White Weenie next. And then Blue Black Control decks after that.
Alright, so White Weenie at 4 and Blue Black at 5.
Yeah. And I'm kind of prejudiced. Like, I really like, Mono Black / Blue Black Control decks and, Trinket decks and stuff like that. But I just don't think. I think they'll be doing very well, but I don't think enough people will play them to catapult it that high.
Yeah.
And then from there, let's go ahead and put Mono Blue Control.
Yeah, ahead of Delver.
Yeah, and then Delver.
Yep.
After that. And then who was left after?
Affinity.
Oh man, I forgot Affinity. I actually want to slide Affinity up to like number 5 and slide everybody else down from there.
It's done. Meaning Blue Black is number 6 and Mono Blue Control is number 7 and Delver is number 8.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Now, that's kind of like a counter prediction because I was saying Stompy will not be number 1 this far out. The problem I have is I can't see anything better right now. So I'm making two predictions where I'm going to have to be wrong on one of those. Because I feel like something, again, this is just an aspirational thing, the inner child. I'm hoping that there will be some really great innovations going on. And, you know, I don't know what that's going to be right now. I don't see anything developing that's better than Stompy over the course. I think that Stompy's got a better reactionary game plan playing against all these control decks that are going to spring up. Because, and here's my rationale. Right now, if you're playing mono blue aggro, being able to pop out a sprite that can, a little fairy sprite that can counterspell a one-costed spell is huge against all the aggressive decks out there. And aggressive decks are still going to be good, but you're going to finally see a bunch of expensive costed spells starting to rise up again. And so, based on that, I think that it's going to lose some value there. And once those counterspell sprites start to lose value, a bunch of the deck is really reliant on that, because then that chains into ninjas. Yeah. So I think that Vines of Vastwood is going to be doing some heavy lifting for Stompy.
Yeah, they've actually the last few months they've stopped playing Silhana Ledgewalker because it didn't do anything against Stormpost and Temporal Fissure. But I think Silhana Ledgewalker is coming back in force.
I completely agree. I think that is I am on board with that 110%. I think that card's going to do major heavy lifting. Yeah. So, is there anything I have forgotten to talk? Is there any decks? Because I didn't.
No, I think we've gone through. Did you have anything else? Let's look at your mail here, see if we missed something. No, I think we addressed all of it. Do you have anything else?
No, I just wanted to make sure, like, somebody's, favorite deck, they're like, how could you not even talk about this deck, But, so I tried to hit on as many as I possibly could, I even, with the slivers, but that's really everything I can think of, man.
All right, thank you for making these predictions then, and it will be interesting to see how things develop. And I think bright times are ahead.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, like, I'm going to be out there, when I get a chance, I'm going to be out there playing some kind of offbeat mid-range deck, or mid-range control-ish deck, most likely. But for whatever that's worth, I don't really want to play mono black control coming out. I feel like it's just too obvious.
Yeah, I will be playing blue black.
I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try to come up with something else. We'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, thank you, and see you online.
All right, thanks a bunch. Thanks for having me on, Dan. I appreciate it, man.
Bye-bye.